He came in for dinner. Another lonely billionaire with a heart made of routine and regret. But when the black waitress slid a folded note beside his untouched steak, the world stopped. His hands trembled. His breath vanished. The words on that paper weren't just ink. They were the ghost of everything he'd buried. Welcome, beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. The rain had a way of making the Argent feel smaller, like a secret kept between polished glass and the humming city outside. At table 7, a man sat alone. His watch was worth more than most cars, but he checked it out of habit, not necessity. Malcolm Williams didn't need to wait for anyone. He hadn't in years. He ordered the same meal every Thursday: medium rare steak, asparagus, 1 glass of Bordeaux. Efficiency disguised as appetite. But beneath the surface, it was ritual, the one night he allowed himself to feel human. Across the room, Regina Wards adjusted her apron and approached with the quiet grace of someone who'd long learned to be invisible. "Evening, sir," she said softly. Malcolm looked up, and something in her voice, low but steady, brushed a corner of memory he didn't recognize. He nodded. "Evening." Regina smiled, that professional, practiced kind. "Your usual Mr. Williams?" He hesitated. "Yes, thank you." As she turned away, he caught the faintest trace of something unexpected. Nerves? Guilt? He couldn't name it, but it lingered. When Regina returned with his drink, the restaurant's low jazz had melted into the clinking rhythm of silver and glass. She placed the Bordeaux gently before him. "Your meal will be right up," she said. Malcolm nodded again, his attention drawn not to her words, but to the way her fingers trembled. Barely, but there. He spoke before he could stop himself. "You new here?" "6 months." "Oh." He took a sip of his wine. "You seem steady." Her lips twitched into the smallest smile. "Steady's all I can afford to be." That answer stayed with him longer than it should have. In the kitchen, Kim, the senior waitress, nudged Regina's elbow. "You good, girl? You look like you saw a ghost." Regina forced a laugh. "Maybe I did." "You're shaking." Regina exhaled. "It's fine. Just a long day." But it wasn't fine. Every Thursday, the same man came in, ordered the same meal, sat in the same chair. She had memorized his quiet loneliness, the way he stirred his wine like he was trying to remember why it mattered. Tonight, she was going to break the pattern. When she placed the steak in front of him, she slipped a small folded paper beside the plate, subtle, practiced, deliberate. Her hands trembled again. He noticed. "What's that?" Malcolm asked, brows furrowing. Regina froze, then whispered, "Please, just read it later." Their eyes met, hers full of fear, his full of suspicion. Without another word, she turned and walked away. Malcolm stared at the paper for a long time before finally opening it. The handwriting was delicate but determined. "I'm sorry. My father took something from you 15 years ago. I've carried his guilt every day since. Please forgive us. Regina Wards." The words struck like a physical blow. His fork clattered against the plate. The room spun, faintly, quietly, but he sat there motionless. He wasn't sure how long he stayed that way. When he finally rose, the check remained untouched. He walked out into the rain, the note still open in his hand. 15 years ago, there had been another storm, the night of the crash. The night his little girl had died. The driver had never been found. Until now. The handwriting blurred in the downpour, but the name burned clear in his mind. Regina Wards. In the distance, Regina stood by the restaurant door, watching his silhouette disappear into the storm. Her chest tightened with both relief and fear. She'd finally told him. She just didn't know what that truth would cost. The note lay on the marble desk like a living thing, whispering ghosts into the silence. "I was the driver. I took your world. I am sorry." Malcolm Williams had read it a dozen times, but the words refused to lose their weight. His reflection in the window trembled with each replay of that sentence, each echo of memory that clawed its way up from the grave. The room smelled faintly of scotch and rain. Somewhere far below, the city buzzed, oblivious. He pressed his fingers to the glass, watching lightning flicker over the skyline. 15 years ago, there had been lightning too, the night he lost his daughter, Emily. He remembered the police call, the hospital hallway, the sterile smell of antiseptic and blood. The driver had fled, the case gone cold. For years, Malcolm had kept his pain polished, like marble, smooth, untouchable. Until now. Now the marble had cracked. He sat down slowly, chest tight. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was stunned, suspended between disbelief and revelation. That waitress, Regina Wards, her father had been the man. He should hate her. He wanted to. But beneath the anger was something else. Curiosity, confusion, a strange recognition. Why would she give this to me? He whispered aloud. Why now? The question echoed through the vast, empty room. Across town, Regina sat on her apartment floor, surrounded by bills, wet sneakers discarded by the door. Her brother, Caleb, coughed softly in the next room. The apartment was small, peeling paint, flickering light, but it was theirs. She held her phone, checking it for a message that hadn't come. Regina, Caleb called, voice weak. You okay? She forced a small smile. Yeah, baby. Just tired. But she wasn't tired. She was terrified. She'd looked a billionaire in the eye and handed him her family's darkest secret. He could ruin her with a word. Her job, her reputation, everything. She unfolded the carbon copy of the note she'd kept for herself. Her father's writing was neat, deliberate, heavy. She could almost hear his voice. If I don't face my sins, you'll carry them instead. Well, Daddy, she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. I carried it, but I don't know if I did the right thing. She thought of Malcolm's face when he'd read it, the way his composure had shattered, the way his eyes had looked lost. It hadn't been rage. It had been grief. And that broke her even more. 3 days passed. Regina worked her shifts, expecting a storm, a call from her manager, a lawyer, something. But silence lingered instead. Until Thursday, when she clocked in, her manager, Mr. Doyle, stopped her by the counter. You're serving table 7 again. Regina's heart lurched. Sir, maybe someone else. He raised a brow. Mr. Williams requested you personally. The tray in her hand felt suddenly heavier. Requested me? Doyle nodded. Don't screw this up. When Regina approached, Malcolm was already there, seated in the same booth. His expression is unreadable. Good evening, Mr. Williams, she began softly. Sit, he said. Her breath caught. Waitresses didn't sit with customers. Especially not this one. I shouldn't. Please. His tone wasn't commanding, but it left no room for refusal. She hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him. Her hands knotted in her lap. Malcolm studied her face. The same calm, the same quiet sadness. Your father wrote that note. Yes. And you decided to give it to me. Yes. Why? Regina's throat tightened. Because he couldn't. He died last winter. He lived with that guilt every day. I thought, maybe you deserve to know. Malcolm's jaw worked as he tried to form words. Do you realize what that letter did to me? She flinched. I'm sorry. I didn't say I regret it. His voice softened. I just don't know what to do with it. Regina blinked back tears. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Williams. I just needed to tell the truth. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Truth, he repeated, almost tasting the word. Funny how heavy it feels when you've avoided it long enough. For a long moment, neither spoke. The restaurant hummed around them. Laughter, jazz, cutlery, but they were in a world apart. Finally, Malcolm said quietly, Tell me about him. Regina's head jerked up. My father. He nodded. She hesitated, then began. His name was David Wards. He worked as a chauffeur for a private client back then. That night, he was driving home after a double shift. He was tired, it was raining. He didn't see the car until she stopped, choking on the words. Malcolm's eyes glistened, but his voice was steady. Until it was too late. Regina nodded, tears slipping free. He turned himself in? Malcolm asked. No, she whispered. He panicked. He said he saw lights behind him, thought someone else would stop. But no one did. He lived with that guilt for the rest of his life. He never stopped talking about your daughter. He knew her name. Malcolm swallowed hard. Emily. Regina's breath caught. Yes. Malcolm's hand moved to his chest, rubbing at the ache spreading there. Not anger, grief. The kind that hollowed you out. He stood abruptly, muttering, "Excuse me," and walked toward the restroom. Regina sat frozen, feeling like she'd ripped open both their wounds. Inside the marble-tiled restroom, Malcolm leaned on the sink, staring at his reflection. His pulse pounded. He splashed cold water on his face, but it didn't help. He saw Emily's face in every reflection, her laughter, her drawings, her little hand waving goodbye that morning. He had spent millions building memorials, but none of them brought peace. Now, sitting across from the daughter of the man who'd taken her from him, he felt the absurd, painful closeness of the past. He whispered to the mirror, "What do I do with this?" The mirror, of course, stayed silent. Back at the table, Regina stared at the empty seat. Her palms were slick with sweat. She wanted to flee, to vanish before he returned with a verdict. Kim approached with a nervous glance. "Girl, that's him again?" Regina nodded weakly. Kim sighed. "You are brave or crazy. I can't tell which. Maybe both." When Malcolm returned, his face was composed again, but his eyes were different. Softer, though still shadowed. "Saturday. Regina, I don't know how to respond to this. I can't undo the past." "I know," she whispered. "But I can tell you this. Your father's words stopped my heart. Yes. But not because of hate. Because for the first time, I remembered her as human again. Not a symbol. A person." Tears filled Regina's eyes. "She was lucky to have you." "No," Malcolm said quietly. "I was lucky to have her. Even for a while." They spoke no further. When the bill came, Malcolm left triple the amount as a tip. Regina tried to hand it back. "I can't take this." He smiled faintly. "It's not payment. It's gratitude for your courage." And then he was gone again, leaving her staring after him, heart trembling between relief and confusion. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Back home, Malcolm couldn't sleep. He walked his darkened halls, past framed photos of his daughter, his late wife, the family that had once filled the rooms with laughter. He replayed Regina's voice. He lived with that guilt every day. And for the first time in 15 years, Malcolm wondered if he had, too. If his own obsession with punishment and control had been just another kind of running away. He poured himself another glass of water and whispered to the quiet, "Emily, would you forgive him?" A tear slipped down his cheek. Regina knelt beside her bed, fingers pressed together. It had been years since she'd prayed, but tonight she found words. "God, please let him find peace. Let this not destroy us both." Caleb stirred in the other room, and she rose, checking on him. His breathing was steady. For a moment, she smiled. The small, fierce kind that carried both pain and hope. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but somehow she felt lighter. The truth was out. Whatever came next, it would be real. If forgiveness could save one life, but reopen another's wound, would you still speak the truth? Comment below. Would you choose honesty or silence to protect peace? Rain streaked the glass again, same as that night 15 years ago. But this time, the sound didn't feel like grief. It felt like a beginning. In another corner of the city, Regina closed her eyes and whispered, "Maybe we can both start over." The same storm that once tore their worlds apart now rolled gently through the night, carrying the faintest promise of redemption. The night after their conversation, the city felt sharper, colder, as if it, too, was waiting to see what Malcolm Williams would do next. He didn't sleep. The note, now sealed inside his desk drawer, pulsed in his mind like a wound that wouldn't close. The daughter he'd lost, the man who'd taken her, and now his daughter's ghost had a messenger, Regina Ward's, with eyes full of truth and hands trembling from the weight of it. Malcolm had built his empire brick by brick, hotels, restaurants, clubs, all monuments to control. But truth was never something he could buy or manage. It arrived uninvited, handwritten, folded neatly beside a plate of steak. He needed answers. Malcolm called his head of security, Graham, first thing that morning. "Find everything you can on a David Ward's," he said curtly. "Former chauffeur. Deceased. Lived in Atlanta. Start 15 years back." "Understood, sir." "And his daughter, Regina Ward's. Works at the Argent. Should I handle her?" Malcolm's jaw tightened. "No. Just information." Quietly, he ended the call before Graham could ask more. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe a criminal record, maybe proof it was all a scam. Some part of him wanted to find deceit. It would make the pain easier to bury again. But another part of him, the part that had seen Regina's trembling courage, whispered that she was telling the truth. That truth scared him more than any lie ever could. At the restaurant, Regina kept her head down. She didn't mention Malcolm to anyone. Her manager, Mr. Doyle, hovered near the kitchen, eyeing her warily. "You and Mr. Williams got some history I should know about?" Regina froze. "No, sir. Just a customer." Customer doesn't usually request the same waitress 2 weeks in a row. She forced a polite smile. Maybe he liked the service. Doyle frowned, but said nothing else. When she ducked into the staff bathroom during break, she stared at herself in the mirror. The circles under her eyes looked deeper. The reflection felt heavier. "You did the right thing," she whispered. But the voice in her head answered, "Did you?" Caleb's latest hospital bill sat folded in her apron pocket. She'd been saving every tip. The note she'd handed Malcolm had given her peace, but it hadn't paid for medicine. Truth didn't buy groceries. Truth didn't pay rent. Still, she couldn't take it back. 2 days later, she saw him again. He entered the Argent quietly, without his usual entourage, wearing a gray coat and an expression that gave away nothing. The maitre d' led him, again, to table 7. When Mr. Doyle gestured toward Regina, she felt the blood rush to her face. She approached, clipboard clutched to her chest. "Mr. Williams." He met her gaze, calm but unreadable. "Ms. Ward's." They stood there a moment, strangers tied by fate and guilt. "Your usual order?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Just coffee." She nodded and left, feeling the weight of every step. When she returned with the cup, he said quietly, "Sit with me." She hesitated. "Sir, I can't." "I insist." Mr. Doyle glanced over, frowning, but Malcolm gave a subtle wave, a billionaire's privilege. Regina sat, heart racing. "You said your father lived with guilt," Malcolm began. She nodded, eyes fixed on her hands. "He did. It destroyed him." Malcolm exhaled. "Good." Her head snapped up, hurt flashing across her face. He noticed immediately and softened. Not good that he suffered. Good that he felt it. Some people run from what they've done. He didn't. Regina's jaw trembled. He did run, Mr. Williams. He ran that night, and he never forgave himself. They sat in silence. The clatter of silverware and laughter from other tables felt wrong, like joy existing where it shouldn't. Finally, Malcolm said, "You shouldn't have given me that note." She swallowed. "Why not?" "Because now I can't stop seeing your face when I think of her." The words came out before he could stop them. Regina froze. "Your daughter?" He nodded slowly. "Emily. She was 10. I'm sorry," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Malcolm's gaze drifted to the window. "You think sorry changes anything?" Regina straightened. "No, but it's all I have." He turned back to her, and for a second, his control cracked. "And what am I supposed to do with that? Forgive? Pretend it doesn't still wake me up at night?" Her eyes shone. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to keep living a lie." Before either could say more, Doyle appeared beside the table, plastering on a tight smile. "Everything all right here?" "Fine," Malcolm said curtly. Doyle's gaze darted to Regina. "Ms. Ward's kitchen needs you." Regina stood, flustered. "Yes, sir." As she turned, Malcolm said quietly, "Wait." She paused, but Doyle interrupted sharply. "Ms. Ward's." Regina glanced between them, then chose obedience. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams." She disappeared into the kitchen. Malcolm stared at the steaming coffee untouched before him. The cup's reflection warped his face, two versions of himself, fractured down the middle. He pushed the cup aside and stood. "Send my compliments to the chef," he said to Doyle as he left. Doyle nodded politely, but as soon as Malcolm exited, he muttered to a coworker, "That girl's done. He's not coming back after this mess." An hour later, Regina was summoned to Doyle's office. He didn't waste time. "What's going on between you and Mr. Williams?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Then why is my staff telling me you're sitting at his table again?" "He asked me to." "That's not how this works." His tone turned sharp. "You're not here to entertain billionaires. You're here to serve them. You cross that line, you make me look bad." Regina's heart pounded. "I didn't." "Enough." He slapped a paper onto the desk, a disciplinary warning. "One more stunt like that, and you're out." Her throat burned as she nodded silently. Outside, the dining room lights shimmered like nothing had happened. She clenched her fists. She'd told the truth, and now the world wanted to punish her for it. At his penthouse, Graham returned with a thick folder. "David Ward's," he reported. "Born 1960, died last December. No criminal record. Lived clean. Confirmed employment history as a private driver. An accident 15 years ago matches your daughter's case timeline. Witnesses recall a sedan, his model. It was him." Malcolm stared at the photos, a smiling man, a family of 3, young Regina clutching her father's arm. He closed the folder slowly. "Do you want me to pursue the daughter?" Graham asked carefully. Malcolm shook his head. "No. Leave her alone." "Sir, with respect, this could." "I said no." Graham hesitated, then nodded and left. Malcolm sat alone, the folder open before him. The faces of David and Regina stared back. He whispered, "I don't know which of us deserves forgiveness less." That night, Malcolm dreamed for the first time in years. He saw Emily again, barefoot, laughing in the rain. She ran toward him, but when she spoke, it was Regina's voice. He woke up with tears on his face. He realized, then, that he wasn't angry at Regina. He was angry at himself for building a life so high above humanity that he could no longer reach forgiveness. He wanted to hate her, but he couldn't. After her shift, Regina walked home through the rain, shoes soaked, eyes tired. She didn't know if she'd still have a job tomorrow. At her building's entrance, she found an envelope taped to the door. Inside was a check for $5,000 with a single note. "For your brother's treatment." Anonymous. She didn't need to guess who it was from. Regina's hands trembled. It was too much, too kind, too painful. She wanted to tear it up, but tears blurred her vision. She whispered into the night, "Why would you do this, Malcolm?" Because somewhere in the city, a man who'd lost everything was finally starting to remember what compassion felt like. At dawn, Malcolm stood by the window, phone in hand, composing an unsent message to Regina. "You did nothing wrong." He never sent it. In another corner of the city, Regina held the check to her chest, unsure if she was grateful or furious. Both hearts, aching and stubborn, beat in sync, walled off, but already leaning towards something neither could name yet. The storm came suddenly, slamming against the city like a living thing. Thunder cracked above the glass towers, and by dusk, the streets of Atlanta were rivers. Inside the Argent, the lights flickered. Patrons cursed softly, waiters scrambled, and the maitre d' began ushering people toward the private lounge, the only part of the restaurant with backup power. Regina Ward's had just finished clearing the last table when Mr. Doyle shouted across the chaos, "We're closing early. Get the guests inside before the elevators shut down." She nodded, wringing out her damp apron. And then she saw him, Malcolm Williams, standing by the window, watching the storm like it was a memory. For a heartbeat, she thought about pretending not to notice him. But before she could turn, he looked up, and their eyes met. "Ms. Wards," he said, voice calm but low enough to be felt more than heard. "Mr. Williams," she managed. "We're, moving everyone to the lounge until the storm passes." He nodded once. "Lead the way." Her pulse jumped. Being near him always felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong word, one wrong look, and the world might crack open again. They moved through the dim restaurant together, the only light coming from candles scattered across tables. Thunder boomed again, rattling the glass. "Sounds like the world's ending," she murmured. Malcolm almost smiled. "Maybe it's just starting over." She didn't answer. The storm grew worse. By the time they reached the private lounge, most guests had already left. Only a handful of staff remained, and Malcolm, refusing to leave until it cleared. The elevators stopped working an hour later. By midnight, it was just the two of them and a generator humming somewhere below. Regina wrapped her arms around herself. "Power grid's down. Roads flooded. Meaning, we're stuck here till morning." Malcolm looked around the dim room. Leather chairs, a fireplace that didn't work, silence thick enough to choke on. He gestured to one of the chairs. "Sit. You look exhausted." "I'm fine." "Then humor me." Reluctantly, she sat across from him. For a while, they didn't speak. The rain did all the talking, hitting the windows in uneven bursts. Malcolm finally said, "Do you still blame him?" She looked up, startled. "My father." He nodded. Regina hesitated. "Every day? But I also miss him every day." Malcolm's eyes softened. "That's a hard contradiction to live with." "I think that's what love is sometimes," she said quietly. "Wanting to forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, because your heart won't let go." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe we have that in common." Her gaze lifted. "You mean Emily?" He swallowed, eyes distant. "I used to think the only way to honor her was to stay angry, to never forget what I lost. But now," he exhaled, "now I'm not sure anger honors anyone." Regina blinked away sudden tears. "That's a hard thing to admit." He gave a faint smile. "You make it easier." She froze, unsure what to do with that. At 1:15 a.m., the hum of the generator stuttered, then died. The room plunged into darkness. Regina gasped. "Oh no, it's fine," Malcolm said calmly, pulling out his phone to use as a flashlight. The soft glow lit half his face, all sharp edges and weariness. "Shouldn't we call someone?" she asked. "Lines are down. Power grid's toast. You'll have to get comfortable here for a while." She laughed bitterly. "Comfortable? With my boss ready to kill me if I'm late tomorrow?" Malcolm chuckled. It was a quiet, rusty sound, one that startled even him. "You have a sense of humor." "Sometimes that's all I have." Something shifted between them then, small, almost invisible, but real. He gestured toward a bottle of unopened champagne in a bucket nearby. "I think the owner won't mind if we borrow it." Regina raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Technically, I am the owner." She blinked. "This is one of your restaurants." "Was." He poured 2 glasses. "I sold it years ago. Kept the name. Nostalgia." "Then I guess you can't fire me for drinking with you." "Guess not." They shared a hesitant toast. "To surviving the storm," he said. She smiled faintly. "To surviving the truth." Their glasses clinked. As the minutes stretched, the champagne loosened the edges of their walls. Malcolm asked, "Why'd you really give me that note?" Regina traced her finger along the rim of her glass. "Because I couldn't stand carrying it anymore. Every time I saw a story about your foundation, about your daughter's memorial, I thought, he doesn't even know who took her. It didn't feel fair." He nodded slowly. "And now that I do," she bit her lip. "I thought it would make things right. But it didn't. It just made everything heavier." He studied her. "You know, I told myself I hated you for that letter. But I think I hated myself more for needing it." She looked up, eyes wide. "You needed it?" He nodded. I needed to stop living like grief was my whole identity. The silence after that was soft, not empty, but full. The rain softened. The storm outside gave way to the rhythm of their breathing. Regina leaned back, eyes half closed. You ever wonder what forgiveness feels like? Malcolm's answer was quiet. Like freedom. But it's expensive. She smiled faintly. Everything with you sounds expensive. He laughed, shaking his head. Fair point. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, just long enough for him to see her face in full. The exhaustion, the strength, the grace that came from surviving what should have broken her. Something inside him shifted. He whispered, almost to himself, "You look like her." Regina blinked. Who? Emily. Her breath caught. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them felt fragile, sacred, almost. Then she said softly, "Maybe that's why you don't hate me." He met her eyes. "Maybe that's why I can't." The storm outside quieted to a soft drizzle. Regina rested her chin on her hands, fighting sleep. "You should get some rest," Malcolm said gently. "I can't sleep when it rains." "Because of the night it happened?" She nodded. "My dad used to drive in storms. Said rain was honest. It hid nothing." Malcolm looked toward the window. He wasn't wrong. She turned to him. "You ever get tired of being strong?" His lips curved sadly. "Every day. Then maybe stop for a while." He met her gaze, the air between them thick with unspoken things, guilt, tenderness, recognition. For a fleeting second, he reached out, then stopped himself, fingers curling into his palm. Regina noticed, but said nothing. By dawn, the storm was gone. The city gleamed beneath pale sunlight. Regina stirred, waking from a light doze in the armchair. Malcolm stood by the window, coat over his shoulders, phone back online. "Power's restored," he said. "Roads will clear soon." She rubbed her eyes. "Guess the storm's done with us." He smiled faintly. "For now." Before she could respond, his driver called. "I'll send the car for you," Malcolm said. Regina shook her head quickly. "No, I'll walk. I need the air." He hesitated. "Regina?" She turned. "Yes. Thank you. For last night. For talking." Her smile was small but real. "You're welcome, Mr. Williams. But talking's easy when you're both trapped." He chuckled. "True. Still, I'd like to do it again. Voluntarily, next time." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Are you asking me to dinner?" "Maybe I am." "Careful," she said, smirking faintly. "That sounds dangerously close to forgiveness." He watched her go, her laughter echoing softly against the glass. Can two broken hearts really begin again if their pasts are written in the same tragedy? Thought balloon. Comment below. Do you think forgiveness can turn into love? Outside, the city dripped with the aftermath of the storm, puddles reflecting sunrise, the scent of wet earth rising like renewal. Malcolm Williams stood at the window, watching Regina Ward's disappear down the street. For the first time in years, he didn't feel haunted. He felt alive. The morning after the storm, sunlight broke through Atlanta's skyline like forgiveness trying to reach the ground. But forgiveness, like sunlight, didn't always land where it was most needed. Regina Ward's woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of her brother coughing from the next room. She rushed to him. "Caleb." He waved her off weakly. "I'm fine, Reggie. Just the morning crud." "You need to take your meds," she said, reaching for the pill bottle. He glanced at it, then back at her. "They're almost out, huh?" She didn't answer. The silence was confirmation enough. Caleb smiled faintly. "You'll figure it out. You always do." But her mind was somewhere else. On Malcolm Williams, on his offer of dinner, on the storm, on his voice breaking when he'd said you look like her. She couldn't tell if it scared her or softened her. 2 days later, the bell above her apartment door buzzed. She froze. No one visited her home. Not here, not in this neighborhood. When she opened the door, there he was, Malcolm Williams, wearing a dark coat, holding a paper bag and looking wildly out of place against the chipped paint of her hallway. "Mr. Williams?" she breathed. He offered a small smile. "I thought we agreed you'd call me Malcolm." I didn't think you meant outside the restaurant. I didn't think I'd show up at your apartment either, he said wryly. But here we are. She blinked at the bag. What's that? Lunch. And maybe an apology. Her heart kicked. For what? For everything I said. And didn't say. They sat at her tiny kitchen table. Him too tall for the chair, her too self-conscious for words. He unpacked the bag. 2 sandwiches, bottled water, and a small bouquet of white daisies. I didn't know your favorite flower, he said softly. So I guessed. Regina stared at the flowers. They were my mom's favorite. Then I guessed right. They ate quietly for a while. Caleb peeked from the hallway, curious. Regina, he asked. She smiled. This is my brother, Caleb. Caleb, this is. I know who he is, Caleb interrupted, eyes wide. You're the guy from TV. The hotel guy. Malcolm chuckled. Something like that. Regina glared gently at her brother. Don't be rude. I'm not. I just, wow. You're really here. Malcolm's gaze softened. It's good to meet you, Caleb. Something about the boy's fragility hit him hard. Maybe because Emily had been around that age when she died. After lunch, Regina walked him to the door. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming. I didn't just come to apologize. Her brow furrowed. Then why? He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. I had my team find the police files from that night. I thought, you might want to see the truth for yourself. She froze. You did what? They're public records. No laws broken. I just figured you deserved to know. Her voice trembled. You had no right. I know, but I needed answers too. She took the envelope, hesitated, then opened it. Inside were scanned copies, statements, reports, witness photos. One image stopped her heart. Her father, David Ward's, sitting on the curb beside a mangled car, head in his hands. The caption read, Suspect detained for questioning. No alcohol detected. Tears filled her eyes. He wasn't drunk. Malcolm shook his head. No. Tire blowout. Faulty manufacturing. The company paid a quiet settlement to avoid scandal. Regina's voice broke. All those years, he blamed himself. Malcolm's voice was soft. So did I. She sank onto the couch, shaking. He used to wake up at night screaming. Said he saw her face. I thought it was punishment. But it was just grief. Malcolm sat beside her, carefully. Sometimes grief disguises itself as guilt. Easier to hate ourselves than admit it was out of our hands. Regina looked at him through tears. Why are you doing this? He hesitated. Because I can't stand watching someone else carry what I carried. The silence that followed was raw, the kind that doesn't need filling. Regina reached for his hand without thinking. You didn't have to bring this. I did, he said quietly, because I think your father deserves peace. And maybe so do we. As she flipped through the papers, a folded note slipped out, yellowed, handwritten. What's this? Malcolm frowned. I don't know. It was in the file. Regina unfolded it, her father's handwriting. To whoever finds this. If I don't get the chance to say it, I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone to suffer because of me. I prayed one day the truth would come out. Maybe then, the little girl I couldn't save will forgive me. Tell her father I never stopped seeing her face. David Ward's. Her sob broke the quiet like thunder. Malcolm's eyes glistened. He never meant to run. He was in shock. Regina nodded through tears. He wanted to tell you, but he was afraid you'd destroy him. I would have, Malcolm admitted. Back then. And now. He looked at her, really looked. Now I just wish I'd met him. The walls that once held resentment now held something else, something tender, unspoken, fragile. Regina wiped her eyes. I used to hate you, she said honestly. Before I ever met you. You were this untouchable man, the one who had everything my family didn't. I thought you'd never understand pain. Malcolm let out a broken laugh. Funny, I used to think money could protect me from it. She smiled sadly. Guess we were both wrong. He looked at her, voice low. Regina, you make me remember what grace feels like. Her heart thudded. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because I might believe them. Their eyes locked. The air between them shimmered, the first glimmer of something dangerous and beautiful. She handed him one of the files, a picture of her father holding her as a child. Malcolm traced the edges thoughtfully. He looks proud. He was, she whispered. Even after what happened, he still called himself a lucky man. Said I was his second chance. Malcolm swallowed hard. Maybe that's what you are for me. Regina blinked. A second chance. Yes. At forgiveness. At life. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. Sometimes silence was the most honest answer. Before he left, Malcolm turned at her door. I'm hosting a fundraiser this weekend. For children's hospitals. Come as my guest. Regina hesitated. You really think I belong in your world? He smiled gently. I'm starting to think it's my world that doesn't belong without you in it. Her throat tightened. You don't even know me. I know enough. She wanted to say no, to protect her fragile peace, but something inside whispered yes. As the door closed behind him, she pressed the letter from her father to her heart. Maybe the truth didn't always destroy. Maybe sometimes it heals. And maybe, just maybe, the storm was starting to pass. The night of the fundraiser came dressed in glitter and good intentions. Crystal chandeliers glowed above silk-draped tables, violins whispered through the air, and money moved like perfume, soft, invisible, intoxicating. But Malcolm Williams didn't see the lights or the money. He saw her. Regina Ward stood at the entrance of the Grand Marlowe Hotel, her breath caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. The silver gown she wore was simple, borrowed from her coworker, but under the ballroom lights, it shimmered like something spun from moonlight. Her curls framed her face, her nerves hidden beneath the grace of someone who'd spent her life serving others but never standing among them. Then she saw him, Malcolm, by the stage, wearing a tailored black suit and a rare, unguarded smile. He caught her gaze across the room, and for a moment, the crowd disappeared. He walked toward her, each step slow, deliberate, eyes never leaving hers. Regina, he said softly, stopping in front of her. Malcolm, she whispered back. I feel like I just walked into someone else's life. He smiled. Maybe it's finally yours. Halfway through the evening, the orchestra shifted to something slow, elegant. 1,000 conversations softened as couples drifted to the floor. Malcolm extended a hand. Dance with me. Regina hesitated. I'm not good at this. Neither am I. That's the point. She laughed nervously and took his hand. His touch was firm but gentle, and as they moved together, her body began to trust the rhythm. You surprise me, she said. How so? You don't seem like someone who dances. He smiled faintly. That's because I haven't had a reason to. Her cheeks flushed. And now I do. For the first time in years, he wasn't the billionaire haunted by ghosts or the man who'd buried his heart under marble. He was just a man, holding a woman who reminded him that life could still be kind. When the song ended, they didn't step apart immediately. The applause around them felt distant, almost irrelevant. Later, they slipped outside, away from the crowd and the music. The hotel's private garden was quiet, draped in fairy lights, the night air cool and forgiving. Regina kicked off her heels and sighed. How do people live in those things? Malcolm chuckled. You did fine. Barely. I almost tripped on some hedge fund manager. I would have caught you, he said simply. She looked up at him. You always say the right thing. He shook his head. No, I just mean what I say. For a while, they walked in silence, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. Finally, she said, you ever get tired of pretending everything's okay? He glanced at her. All the time. But people expect confidence from men like me. It's part of the brand. And what do you expect from yourself? He thought for a moment. To feel something again. Something real. She smiled softly. You're doing that now. He turned toward her, voice low. So are you. A gust of wind blew, lifting her hair into his face. He laughed, brushing it away. Guess even nature wants to get in between us, she teased. Nature's got a good taste. She giggled, the sound bright and disarming. You're actually funny when you're not brooding. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. For the first time, laughter didn't feel like betrayal to either of them. It felt like a release, like a tiny rebellion against everything they'd lost. Inside, a photographer moved through the guests, snapping pictures for the foundation's website. "Mr. Williams," he called. "One photo for the donors board." Malcolm nodded. "Sure." Then he turned to Regina. "Join me." She blinked. "Oh no, I'm not." He interrupted gently. "You're part of this story too." She hesitated, then stood beside him. As the flash went off, she felt his hand rest lightly on her back. Warm, steady, real. The photographer smiled. "Beautiful. You two look like you belong together." Regina laughed awkwardly, but Malcolm didn't. He just looked at her, a quiet truth in his eyes. After the event, he drove her home, but instead of the usual goodbye, he said, "Come up, just for a few minutes." She hesitated, heart pounding. "Malcolm, it's just the rooftop. I promise." Something in his voice, gentle, earnest, made her nod. The rooftop overlooked the glittering city. Wind tugged at her hair as she stepped to the edge. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He joined her. "I come here when I need to remember that life keeps moving." "And does it help?" "Sometimes. Tonight it does." She turned to him. "Why me, Malcolm? Why reach out to me? I'm not from your world. I'm just—" "Don't finish that sentence," he said softly. "Because everything you think you're not is everything I've needed." Her breath hitched. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why?" "Because I might start hoping." He smiled sadly. "Maybe that's the point." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small box. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a silver locket. Simple, unpretentious. Inside, one side was empty. The other held a photo of Emily, the daughter he'd lost. Regina looked up, confused. "I want you to put something on the other side," he said quietly. "Something that reminds you life keeps going." She stared at him, emotion flooding her voice. "You sure you want me to carry that?" "Yes, because you remind me of what's worth carrying." Her fingers trembled as she closed the locket. "Thank you." The air grew still. Malcolm stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. "Regina?" She closed her eyes, breath trembling. "You don't have to say anything. I want to." His thumb traced the edge of her jaw. "You've done more for me in weeks than anyone has in years." She whispered, "Malcolm." The world shrank to that moment. The pulse of city lights below, the hum of the night, their breathing sinking like a promise. He leaned closer. So close. Then her phone rang. The spell broke. She stepped back, fumbling for it. "It's Caleb." Go," he said softly, forcing a smile. "He needs you." She nodded, her eyes glistening with something unsaid. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Please do." She left, the locket clutched tight in her hand. Malcolm stayed on the rooftop long after she was gone. The city stretched endlessly, full of lights he'd once thought meaningless. Now every one of them reminded him of her. He whispered to the night, "I think I'm falling for you, Regina." The wind carried it away, but his heart knew. Back home, Regina sat beside Caleb's bed as he slept. She opened the locket and looked at the photo inside. For the first time, she didn't see tragedy. She saw connection, continuity, life that refused to end where pain began. She pressed the locket to her lips and whispered, "Maybe this is what healing looks like." The next morning, Malcolm texted her one line. "I meant every word I said last night." Regina read it 3 times before smiling through tears. The girl who once carried guilt now carried possibility. The man who once buried his heart now wanted it back. And though neither knew what tomorrow held, both finally believed in something simple. That maybe, just maybe, love was worth the risk again. For weeks after the fundraiser, everything felt quietly right. Malcolm Williams and Regina Wards began to meet often, lunches that turned into dinners, conversations that lasted long after closing time, moments so natural it frightened them both. He laughed more. She dreamed again. But peace is fragile. And sometimes, when people are finally happy, life remembers what it took from them and comes to collect its due. It began on a Monday morning. Regina was pouring coffee at the Argent when her coworker whispered, "You've seen it, right?" "Seen what?" He slid his phone across the counter. The headline read, "Billionaire Malcolm Williams spotted with waitress linked to tragic past. Is guilt driving the romance?" Beneath it was a photo of her and Malcolm from the fundraiser, his hand on her back, both of them smiling. Regina's breath caught. The article twisted everything, her father's guilt, the note, the accident, into a cruel spectacle. Sources claim the waitress, daughter of the man responsible for the 2008 crash that killed Williams' child, has recently been seen accompanying the billionaire at public events. Insiders question if this is forgiveness or manipulation. Her vision blurred. "Who would?" Publicist says it came from his office, her coworker murmured. She dropped the cup. It shattered across the floor. That night, she stormed into his penthouse, her eyes blazing. "Why did you do it?" she demanded. Malcolm looked up from his desk, startled. "Do what?" "The article. You told them about my father." He blinked. "I didn't." "Don't lie to me, Malcolm." Her voice cracked. "You said you wanted peace. Instead, you turned my life into a headline." He stood, anger flashing now too. "You think I'd exploit you? After everything? It came from your office." He clenched his jaw. "I didn't authorize anything. I'll handle it." "You already handled it. My manager suspended me today." He froze. "What?" "They said I was bringing negative attention to the restaurant." Malcolm's hands curled into fists. "I'll fix this." She laughed bitterly. "You can't fix everything with money. That's not what I... You think because you're powerful, you can rewrite everyone's pain to make yourself feel better? You don't want forgiveness, Malcolm. You want control." The words hit like glass. He took a slow step toward her. "That's not true." She met his gaze, trembling. "Then tell me this isn't just guilt." He hesitated. Just a second. But it was enough. Regina's eyes filled. "That's what I thought." She turned to leave. "Regina, wait." But the door slammed before he could reach her. He stood in silence, her words echoing through the empty apartment. "You don't want forgiveness. You want control." He hated how true it felt. Because somewhere inside, maybe he had wanted to feel powerful again, not helpless like the night he lost Emily. Maybe helping Regina was his way of pretending he still held destiny in his hands. And now he'd lost her too. He sat down, running his hands over his face. "What have I done?" At home, Regina tore the article in half, then again, until her fingers ached. Her phone buzzed, Malcolm calling. She stared at it, then threw it onto the couch. Caleb appeared in the doorway, pale but steady. "Reggie, you okay?" She forced a smile. "I'm fine." "You're lying." "I said I'm fine." He flinched. Immediately, guilt flooded her. She knelt beside him, voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I don't know what to do." He handed her the locket. "Dad used to say storms pass faster if you stop running from the rain." Her throat tightened. That sounds like him. Then maybe listen to him. She hugged her brother, tears finally spilling over. Days passed. Neither called the other. The world kept talking. The media spun theories. Social networks swarmed with judgment. Malcolm's board members grew restless. "End it," one of them urged. "The optics are bad. You can't be seen courting the daughter of the man who..." "Enough," Malcolm snapped. "She's not her father. And I'm not the man you think I am." But that night, when the cameras swarmed his office lobby, shouting her name, even he felt trapped. He drove for hours with no destination, until he found himself outside the Argent. It was closed, the windows dark. He whispered into the steering wheel, "I'm sorry, Regina." 3 days later, a letter arrived at her apartment. It wasn't signed, but she recognized his handwriting instantly. "Regina, I didn't leak the story. I swear it. But maybe the world is right to doubt us. Maybe what we shared was a mistake built on tragedy. Still, if I could go back, I'd read your note again. I'd let it break me all over, because it led me to you. If you ever find it in your heart to see me again, I'll be at the pier where it all began, Saturday, 8 p.m. M. She read it twice, then folded it carefully. Caleb asked quietly, "You gonna go?" She shook her head. "No, I can't keep getting hurt." But her voice trembled. Saturday came with another storm. Malcolm stood at the pier, rain soaking his coat, the river churning below. He waited an hour, then another. She didn't come. Finally, he whispered, "I guess that's my answer." He turned to leave. "Malcolm!" He spun. There she was, drenched, breathless, clutching her locket. "You're insane," he said, half laughing through tears. "It's pouring." "So are you," she shot back, stepping closer. "I wasn't going to come. But then I remembered what you said, that maybe some things are worth the risk." His voice broke. "I thought I lost you." "You almost did." She looked at him, trembling. "Did you mean what you wrote?" "Yes, every word." "Then stop apologizing for loving me." He froze. "Regina." She took his hand. "I don't care what people think. You didn't break me. You helped me stand." And though the rain fell harder, he didn't feel cold anymore. But peace never holds long in a love built on truth. A flash of lightning lit the river, and behind them, paparazzi shouted, cameras flashing. Regina gasped, realizing too late what was happening. "They followed me," she whispered. Malcolm pulled her close. "Let them." But the next morning, headlines screamed worse than before. "Williams declares love for Waitress. I'd let it break me again." His investors threatened to pull out. His foundation donors backed away. By noon, his assistant stormed in. "You're losing everything." Malcolm's reply was quiet. "Then maybe it's time I finally earned something worth losing." If love costs you everything you've built, your reputation, your safety, your pride, would you still choose it? Thought balloon. Comment below. Is love worth the ruin it sometimes brings? That night, Malcolm stared out over the city, the glow of headlines fading in the glass. He had nothing left to hide behind, no empire big enough to shield him from truth. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. Somewhere across town, Regina lay awake, the sound of rain whispering against her window. And even though they were apart, both whispered the same thought into the night. "Please, don't let this be the end." Days passed in uneasy silence. The world moved on, but neither of them did. Malcolm sat in his penthouse, the city sprawling beneath him like a promise he no longer believed in. Contracts lay unsigned on his desk, his phone buzzing with unread messages from lawyers, PR teams, and investors who wanted him to fix the narrative. He didn't respond to any of them. He stared instead at the photo on his desk. Emily, smiling in her pink raincoat. The same rain that had drenched him the night Regina showed up at the pier. He whispered, "I wish you could have met her, sweetheart. She's everything good left in me." Across town, Regina sat on the edge of her bed, the locket in her hands. She'd reopened the Argent that morning. People stared. Whispers followed her every step. But she held her head high. Still, when she got home, she broke. Her reflection in the mirror looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, hands trembling from holding too much pain. "Why does loving someone have to hurt this much?" she murmured. Caleb looked up from his homework. "Because the things that matter always do." She smiled weakly. "You're too wise for 12. He shrugged. "You're too stubborn for 28. She laughed softly, tears spilling. "Touché." Then her brother asked, "Do you still love him?" Her breath caught. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe I never stopped." By Wednesday, Malcolm's board held an emergency meeting. "Malcolm," his CFO said, "the fallout is serious. If you don't issue a public apology and distance yourself from Miss Ward's, we could lose millions." He leaned back in his chair, silent. Another voice chimed in, sharp and cold. "This isn't about your personal life. It's about responsibility to shareholders." Malcolm finally spoke. "And what about responsibility to myself?" "Excuse me." He stood. "For years, I've lived my life cleaning up other people's expectations, fixing optics, maintaining appearances. I lost my daughter because I cared more about meetings than moments." He looked around the room, his voice steady. I won't lose the only person who's made me feel alive again just to make you comfortable." Then he turned and walked out. The boardroom fell silent. That night, Regina sat by candlelight, writing. "Malcolm, I read your letter 100 times. Each word hurts because it's true. We were built on tragedy, but maybe that's why we understand each other. You taught me that pain doesn't have to define us, that love can come from ashes. But I don't know if I'm brave enough to keep fighting the world for something so fragile. Still, if you ever need me, I'll be at the river Sunday at dusk. That's where peace begins for me." She folded the letter, sealed it, then hesitated. Instead of mailing it, she tucked it inside the locket. Sunday arrived. Neither called, neither texted, but both felt the pull, that invisible thread of unfinished love tugging at the heart. Malcolm sat by his window, staring at the clouds gathering above the skyline. He could almost hear her laugh. The sound had become part of him now, lodged somewhere between regret and hope. Finally, he stood. He wasn't going to lose her because of silence. Regina sat on the same bench where she'd first handed him that folded note months ago, the one that stopped his heart and started everything. She was tracing the locket with her thumb when she heard footsteps behind her. "Guess I'm not the only one who couldn't stay away," Malcolm said quietly. She turned. There he was, no suit, no armor. Just a man in a raincoat, eyes soft and uncertain. Her lips parted. "You came. So did you." They stood there for a long time, just looking at each other. Finally, he said, "You never mailed the letter." She frowned. "How do you know about it?" He smiled faintly. "Because you're holding it right now." Her hand tightened around the locket. "You're impossible. And you're unforgettable." She shook her head, tears threatening. "Malcolm, what are we doing?" He took a step closer. "I don't know. But whatever it is, I don't want it to end." She looked away. "The world hates what they don't understand. We'll be torn apart again." "Then let them try," he said. "I've already lost everything they could take." "What about your company? Your reputation?" He smiled sadly. "Reputation is what people think of me. Love is what makes me me." Her voice trembled. "You really mean that?" He nodded. "Regina, you gave me back the part of myself I buried with Emily. If I have to fight the world to keep that, I will." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You don't even know what comes next. Neither did you when you handed me that note. But you did it anyway." Her breath hitched. "I was terrified." "So am I," he whispered. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." For a long time, neither spoke. Then Regina said quietly, "I don't want to be your redemption story, Malcolm." He stepped closer. "You're not. You're my beginning." The river shimmered behind them, reflecting city lights like fragments of hope. She touched his face, her thumb brushing a raindrop or a tear. "You're really not going to let me go, are you?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Not unless you make me." Regina exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. "You're stubborn." Hopelessly. She smiled through tears. "Good. Because so am I." And just like that, the walls they'd built around their hearts began to crumble. It wasn't perfect. It was wet, trembling, full of fear and forgiveness. But it was real. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, "Now what?" He smiled. "Now we live with it. Together." She nodded, resting her head against his chest. "That sounds terrifying." "Then we're doing it right. If love gave you one last chance, after everything you've lost, after everything you've feared, would you take it?" Thought balloon. Comment below. Would you risk peace for one more heartbeat of connection? As the river flowed quietly beside them, the world felt smaller, softer, kinder. They sat in silence, their fingers intertwined. And though neither spoke the word love out loud, it lived between them, strong, fragile, and finally theirs. Sunlight crept through the curtains of Regina Ward's small apartment, spilling across the floor like a quiet promise. On the couch, Malcolm Williams was half asleep, his arm draped protectively across her. The night had been long, not for passion, but for peace. They'd talked for hours, until words ran out and silence took over, a silence that felt like understanding. For the first time in years, neither woke up haunted. Regina blinked, smiling at the sight of him still wearing his watch, his hair mussed, his expression boyishly vulnerable. "You stayed," she whispered. He stirred, half awake. "Of course I did." She chuckled softly. "You don't strike me as a couch kind of guy. Only when the company's worth it." Her cheeks warmed. "Smooth." He opened his eyes and smiled faintly. "Only with you." By noon, they were back at the pier, the same spot where everything had broken and healed. "I spoke to my board this morning," Malcolm said quietly. "I stepped down as CEO." Regina froze. "What?" "I told them I wanted to build something different. Something that means something." Her brow furrowed. "Malcolm, that company was your life." He nodded. "It was. But it stopped feeling like living." She looked at him, tears gathering. "You didn't have to give up everything for me." He smiled gently. "I didn't. I did it for me." He looked out over the water, then back at her. "I'm starting a foundation, one for families who've lost someone to drunk driving. I'd like you to help me run it." She stared at him, stunned. "You're serious?" "As serious as I've ever been." Regina's throat tightened. "I wouldn't even know where to start." "Start where you always have, with your heart." She laughed softly through tears. "You really don't give up, do you?" He reached for her hand. "Not on you." Later that afternoon, they drove to a quiet cemetery outside the city, the place where his daughter, Emily, was buried. Regina had never been there before. The headstone was small, simple. "Emily Grace Williams, forever loved." Malcolm knelt down, brushing his fingers along the stone. "Hey, baby girl," he murmured. "I brought someone with me today." Regina stood back, her chest tight. He glanced up at her. "This is Regina. You'd have liked her. She's stubborn, kind, and she laughs like you used to." Regina's eyes welled. "She helped me remember who I was," he continued. "And she's the reason I can stand here without breaking." He looked at Regina. "You want to say hi?" Regina hesitated, then stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "Hi, Emily. I don't know if I have the right to be here, but I promise I'll take care of your dad. He misses you every second." She knelt beside Malcolm and whispered, "Thank you for letting me love him." A warm breeze passed through the trees, rustling the leaves, as if the universe itself exhaled. Malcolm smiled faintly. "She heard you." Back at the car, Regina pulled the locket from her neck. "I think this belongs to you," she said softly, placing it in his hand. He frowned. "You sure?" She nodded. "You needed me to carry it until you could forgive yourself. I think you finally have." He opened it. On one side, Emily's photo. On the other, the folded note Regina had written that first night at the Argent. He unfolded it, the paper worn and creased from time. It read, "You don't know me, but your pain changed my life. My father was the man who caused the accident. I've carried that guilt for years. But I needed you to know that he was sober for 9 years before he died. He prayed for your forgiveness every night. So do I." Malcolm's eyes blurred as he reread it. When he looked at her, he said, "This note destroyed me and saved me." Regina smiled gently. "That's how truth works." He reached for her hand. "Then let's build something honest, together." 3 months later, the Emily Grace Foundation launched quietly but beautifully. At the opening event, Regina stood beside Malcolm, both humbled by the turnout. Families, survivors, children lighting candles for those they'd lost. Regina took the stage to speak. Her voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. "I used to think forgiveness was something you waited for, like rain in a drought. But I've learned it's something you give, even when the sky is clear. It doesn't erase the pain, but it lets the light in." She paused, glancing at Malcolm. "And sometimes forgiveness brings love. Unexpected, undeserved, but real." Applause filled the hall. Malcolm watched her with quiet pride, knowing in that moment she wasn't just his second chance, she was his compass. Later that evening, after everyone had left, the two of them stood by the rows of flickering candles. Malcolm turned to her. "There's one more thing I need to do." Regina smiled. You've already done enough. Not this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Simple, silver, elegant. Her breath caught. Malcolm. He took her hand. You once told me love scared you because it always left. I'm here to prove it can stay. Tears filled her eyes. You're sure? He smiled softly. I've never been more sure of anything. She laughed through tears. You didn't even ask the question. He grinned. Will you marry me, Regina Wards? She nodded before he could finish the sentence. Yes. God, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and she kissed him, not out of passion, but peace. 1 year later, a warm summer evening found them hosting the Foundation's annual dinner. Regina wore a pale blue dress. Malcolm, now sporting a few silver hairs and an easy smile, stood beside her. Caleb was there too, taller now, healthy, laughing with donors who'd become family. As the night wound down, Regina stood at the same piano that had once played in the Argent restaurant. She played softly, a tune she and Malcolm had chosen together, something simple and pure. He approached her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. You still play beautifully, he whispered. She smiled. Only when I'm happy. After everyone left, they walked hand in hand along the same riverbank where their story began. The air smelled like rain. The city lights shimmered on the water. Malcolm stopped and looked at her. Do you ever think about that night? When you handed me that note? She laughed. Every day. He smiled. Funny. I thought it was the worst night of my life. And now? He pulled her close. Now it's the reason I believe in miracles. She rested her head against his chest. So do I. They stood in silence, the river whispering beneath them, the city fading into the background. Then Regina whispered, Hey, Malcolm. Yeah. I think Emily would have liked me. He smiled, his voice breaking. She would have loved you. As they turned to leave, the camera of the world seemed to pull back, showing two figures walking together, hand in hand, across the same bridge where everything began. The note that once broke them now lived framed in Malcolm's office, the first donation ever made to the Emily Grace Foundation. Underneath it, a small plaque read, Sometimes the hardest truths bring us home. And for Malcolm Williams and Regina Wards, that home wasn't a mansion or a restaurant. It was each other. The billionaire who once ordered steak to fill a void found something richer. The waitress who once carried guilt learned to carry grace. And together, they discovered what forgiveness truly tastes like. Love that never leaves the table.
Thank you for watching the story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.